Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about 1899 episode 2. It is called The Boy. So full spoilers for the episode. Well, I mean, there's so many things to talk about character-wise this episode especially. But let's be honest, you probably want me to react to the final 5 seconds of the episode, which was a genuine holy shit kind of moment. I felt it hit my stomach. They just threw that out there at the end. That could have been like the end of a season moment, like what they did at the end of this episode. So I have warned you about spoilers. But at the end of this episode, you were seeing the captain's reaction to something, and the camera pulls back, and then there's scan lines on him as if he's on a TV screen. And then we pull back, and there's like a series of TV monitors and a wall. Now they're not like modern TV monitors; they're they're more CRT-esque, but still a little bit out of date for 1980 or 1899. You know, a little bit further ahead in technology. Now, is this still in this time period, and someone's got future technology, either because it really existed earlier than we thought it did, as far as this show's like universe is concerned? Is there time travel stuff going on, or is this someone watching from the future? I don't know, but it's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's funny because I'm recording this pretty quick after I put the first episode up, and there was a comment about some of the electronic noises in the soundtrack, which I did notice actually in the first episode. They played a couple of times where it almost sounded like a glitch. Like, I think the first time it happened, I almost thought that my stream was just, crapping out for a second for the audio. But clearly, this seems to have now implied that this was intentional, that this was a hint of something coming in terms of this reveal. So this has just opened a can of worms, and I'm glad the episode had this at the end, because I wasn't not enjoying the episode. I thought there was a lot of good little character beats in this one, but the pacing definitely felt a little bit quieter than the first episode, and that's kind of natural for episode 2's by and large, so it's not like a big deal. But I definitely felt it was less exciting than the first episode, although there was a lot of little things that I quite liked. So, I mean, it's probably just easier to try and follow character by character here to actually like talk about everything going on here. The captain starts us off in the episode, and he has, this memory of his family's death. We find out later some context for it, which is the wife set herself and their kids on fire. And we saw the photo of the wife and kids in the last episode, and the captain seemingly recognized something last episode on the Prometheus. It was a, like a ribbon from a dress or something, something that one of his kids might have been wearing. So, I don't necessarily know how I feel about him walking into like sort of memories and talking to like his daughter and then kind of snapping out of it kind of thing. That's maybe the only thing about the show that I don't love so far, because it's very reminiscent of what you get in like supernatural horror movies that I don't like very much. Not that there's not good versions of it, and not that this was a particularly bad version of it, just that it's not necessarily to my taste. But everything else that was in the mystery of this episode I did like. And I did appreciate that there's a hint that the company behind the ships is in this. The captain points out that they want to sink the ship, right? They send a message saying sink ship, which is a bit strange because it's still valuable. It's still a seaworthy ship. If they take it back with them, they can, fuel it up. They can, fix it up a little bit, and it would be good to go. And he points out that their cabins aren't full. They've not sold out like their allotment on the ship, and they're barely breaking even on these trips across the Atlantic. They also point out that this is an English company that bought all these ships from a German company, and they point out that they're lucky that they kept on half of the German crew and the captains and things like that. And this is all kind of like filling into the idea that maybe the company's up to something, and it's okay. Like, the reason why it kept on a lot of this crew is because it wants people that they think are expendable, and that they're probably expecting to go through a few crews and lose some people in whatever they're doing. It's funny because Mara noticed the triangle symbol with the line through it, which she noticed it on the back of the kid's neck, and she points it out on the back of the envelope that both her and the captain have. I actually noticed it was on the carpet as well. So Mara's not noticed that yet. She's not noticed the symbols all over the goddamn ship. But you know, the reason why I'm bringing all this up now is because when the captain kind of comes out of his dream, if you want to call it, I don't necessarily think it is a dream technically, but his journey to talk to his family before he watches his daughter, you know, be set on fire, he ends up coming out of a trapdoor in his cabin, and he's going to explore what's actually down this trapdoor later. But he gets interrupted with the message about the coal that they've got left, because he's going to make a decision based on that. And it was like, oh, so if the ship company's behind this, maybe there actually are, like, not necessarily recreations of anyone's, like, past, but the idea that there is, like, secret areas on the ship that are there as part of whatever this experiment or ritual or whatever this is, you know? Like, so, and this is actually, so one of the things I was talking about in the first review was about the opening scene. I actually went back and watched it again before I watched episode 2, because I wanted to just sort of just confirm a couple of details and sort of set some things straight in my head. What I noticed when I watched it back the second time is that, so I said last review that I thought her in an asylum with her father probably took place after the main story. I don't think that anymore. Because I noticed when I watched that opening scene again, she actually just says, you know, what happened to my brother on the Prometheus. She doesn't mention that she was on a ship. She only mentions that her brother was on the Prometheus. And that was, you know, so, and there was like 4 months between the current storyline and when that ship went missing. So I think it did take place in between that time. Obviously, both her and the captain hearing wake up from a voice. In her case, it was her father saying it. In the captain's case, you don't see who says it. I can't remember if it was a woman's voice or not, because it might have been the wife. But regardless, like, they both heard this same phrase, and they both have the same thing in the back of the letter, all that stuff. I think now it's more likely that, no, this did take place before she came on this ship, and that she has lost some of her memory, and that these binds that were on her wrists were from the asylum. Which leads me into the other big thing that I said last episode, is that the stranger who's came on the ship from the Prometheus, like, could very well be your brother. And I was getting ready to do like some like, you know, like bold predictions and saying, no, he's still, because the first time they see each other this episode, she doesn't recognize him. But by the end of the scene, I was convinced 100% that they were in fact brother and sister, and that they just couldn't remember each other, or at the very least, she couldn't remember him. He maybe have remembered her, right? And I was getting ready to, like, say, no, I'm putting my reputation on the line. This is actually her brother. She's just, like, much like it's been implied about other things, she doesn't remember him, and I think other passengers don't remember stuff as well. However, the bastards decide to confirm it by the end of the episode, pretty much, by showing him looking at her photo in his own cabin. So that pissed me off a little bit, just because I wanted to make that solid prediction. I kind of did last episode anyway, but I wanted to, like, no, it's just, like, this is memory loss, like all the other things are implying. But they kind of confirmed it by the end. So I can't, like, do a complete victory laps and, like, yeah, I stood my ground. I did stand my ground. They just, you know, I didn't have a chance to tell you about it until they confirmed it, unfortunately. But so there's other characters who clearly have forgotten things. The big example, and I'm rather than sticking to one character, I'm darting around here, but my mind's going. But so Jerome and the French wife, this was the big thing for me. So Mara and the stranger, who, let me just get his name. Where is I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. Daniel, right? So Mara and Daniel, right? There's a moment where she says, like, you seem familiar, right? And that was the thing. I was like, nah, that's still her brother, right? So they have that moment where it's clear that they probably did know each other, but they can't remember, or at least one of them can't remember. I got a very similar vibe from when Jerome speaks to the French wife. And not only that, he had her room number on a bit of paper. You know, he was here to go into her room and leave this medal, right? So he clearly knows that he cares about someone in there or something like that, but he hides when she comes in and clearly doesn't necessarily recognize her, at least not beyond like a gut feeling kind of way. So when he goes up to speak to her on the deck of the ship later, they have this kind of interesting chemistry where you get the feeling that these two are probably in love, but they don't remember it. But there's kind of this weird memory or subconscious memory connection happening with chemistry. And if you think about how this marriage with her husband was arranged from her family, and maybe it was because they were trying to curb this inappropriate in their eyes relationship. So I'm starting to really think there's a lot of characters who do not remember something from before, which begs the question, like, how did they lose their memory? The fact that Jerome had a bit of paper with the room number on it, did that mean he knew he was going to lose his memory at some point and he intentionally gave himself this, or did someone else give him this information afterwards? But even if he was given this information afterwards, why does he still feel the need to do it? He wouldn't have that drive, if he didn't remember why he cared, kind of thing. So that's an interesting question that maybe we can get into as we find out more about what's going on with these characters. Kind of whale stuff. So I appreciated those details. One thing that I actually kind of got right was the Spanish rich guy. I think Angel is his name. And then Ramiro's the fake priest. So they confirmed he's a fake priest. But obviously he sort of continues his flirtations with I want to say Kester is the poorer German guy. But he goes to speak to him, and he gives him the gift and all that, and he comes back up, and it's actually Kester's sister, the pregnant woman from the first episode, who comes and confronts him and says, "Stay away from my brother, I'll cut your dick off," and makes it very clear, so clearly her brother has a history of this, and she's trying to look out for him, of being taken advantage of at the very least. But clearly she immediately jumps to the idea that this is like a sexual advance that is being made towards her brother and is trying to curb it. And then the reaction from Ramiro was an interesting thing to watch. And I sort of jokingly suggested last episode, well, not jokingly, it was kind of joking. I said, oh, maybe they're not really brothers. Hell, they could be a couple. Turns out, yeah, they're actually, they end up, going at it rough in this episode. Before the camera focuses on the wolf and the sheep painting on the wall, just to reaffirm who's the top and who's the bottom in this relationship. But, so those seeds were planted. We could see them, and I think that kind of paid off. That felt kind of fulfilling to watch that play out. And so yeah, some interesting sort of things there. And then dipping over to some other characters we don't see as much of. So we mentioned the French wife, but then we have the husband who seems to be interested. And I believe it's a Chinese character, but obviously pretending to be Japanese. So Ling Yi is the character, the one who's pretending to be a geisha, and the French guy's like clearly smitten with her. And maybe this is a memory thing too. I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but he seems to be smitten with her. And then we seem to get a bit of context for the relationship between the other woman who's kind of been bossy around them. It seems to be that this is more of a madame and sort of a prostitute or kind of thing, which like if that's what we're kind of finding out here, because she kind of offers her services to the French husband. So we're setting up some of this stuff. Rosalie is the woman. I'm learning some of these. Oh, sorry, no, that's the actress's name. Virginia. Virginia is the British woman who's like in charge of Ling Yi. So all this stuff is going on. So there's a lot of character stuff. Obviously, the little kid's not saying a word. He's being very creepy and not saying anything. There's even like a conversation between two of the cold guys who basically talked about what could have killed everyone if they're all dead, and maybe it was the kid. What if he's the... In fact, notably, they use the word wolf, which, so it's not, so that's two different types of characters that have brought up a wolf in conversation. I don't necessarily think that's an accident. It seems like thematically they're hitting at something here, and they say, what if the kid is the wolf? And of course, he has the mark in the back of his neck, and this is something the captain at one point, because he's seeing things, he's seeing his dead daughter, he's hearing his dead daughter, goes and grabs the kid at one point and demands to know what's going on. All interesting stuff. Other interesting plot details is that the captain wants to turn around and tow the Prometheus back to Europe, which they can do because they're closer to Europe still than they are to the US, which is, doesn't please everyone on the ship. They're all not quite thrilled about that announcement. Meanwhile, Daniel, our mysterious stranger, and very lately Mara's brother, whips out one of his little beetle things, which lures in the little girl from the last episode. The little girl who, was helping during the pregnant woman crisis and came up to talk to Mara afterwards. This episode, she was helping watch her big brother Kester's hair. And I apologize if I'm getting his name wrong, but I think that's what it was. Crester. Yeah, Crester. I was saying Kester. That was close enough. Crester. She he's a little bit mean to her and tells her to grow up because she's still playing with this doll. But she wants to grow up and be a doctor. That's what she wants to do. She wants to convince her parents to let her finish school. And I think you just get enough with this kid that you feel bad when she dies, right? You feel bad that it's, the implication, as soon as she runs into Daniel and Daniel says, "I'm so sorry," is that he knows he's either about to kill her or he's lured her to her death if it's not him literally doing the murder. But you have to assume that something similar went down one by one on the other ship. And that's the big cliffhanger. Aside from the weird, mysterious, someone is watching video feeds of all these people. How is that happening? That's weird. But aside from that, this girl's been murdered, and this is something now the captain and the crew are aware of and are going to have to deal with the fact that this is... And notably, the captain turns around and looks at the Prometheus. Like, he's clearly thinking, this is related to that. There's something evil about this ship, and there's... I was getting the feeling during this, actually. It was reminding me of that chapter, which they're actually making a whole movie about, from Dracula. There's a chapter where Dracula's traveling from Romania to England, and you get there's a chapter that's like the diary of the captain of the ship, and like how the crew were mysteriously dying like one by one, and this was giving me a little bit of that mood, which is cool. Actually, it's a really good chapter of the book, and I was thinking of it a little bit. So, I think what's neat about the reveal at the end of this episode is that it kind of does put us into... it definitely makes us feel like we're veering more towards science fiction with this, rather than just a cult. Although you can't deny that, the kid keeps picking up the pyramid and, like, giving it to Mara, and, like, clearly there's something at play here. It does make me wonder, okay, so if her brother / Daniel, assuming we're all right about that, like, if he's doing this, like, why is he the instrument of, like, something that's behind all this? Is he doing this as a necessary evil to fight whatever the real big bad is? Or is he being controlled or taken over by something? And that's not, like... So one of the things that I forgot to mention in the review, although I did comment on it in the comments underneath, was... And I noticed this especially the second time I watched the opening scene, is that the door number on the hospital room that Mara's dragged into at the start of the first episode is the same number as her cabin on the boat. And, you can't ignore the possibility here that everyone is, like, in some kind of experiment, and the reason why these numbers match up is because they are actually all still in a hospital somewhere. I don't think it's that simple. I feel like it's a bit more complex than that. Certainly the ending of this episode would certainly seem to imply that they are physically on a boat, that they are not just... This is not just... Unless it's like a feed that's like coming from their heads, right? And it's like they're taking brain scans of everyone and to get this footage. So they're in like some sort of shared, almost Inception or Matrix-like thing, where they're all in a shared world playing out this story, and someone, possibly Mara's father, is like monitoring it and like studying it and seeing what's happening here. I do think that's possible. I'll throw it out there. I'm not necessarily throwing my hat into that and saying that's definitely it. Yeah, it's a bit early for those lavish, confident claims, but that's a possibility. But Evil Within, if you played that video game as well, that everyone's kind of in a shared virtual world or consciousness or whatever you want to call it. That's possible. If it's not that and they're really out in a boat somewhere and they're doing all this, then, like, how is this footage going anywhere? Where is the cameras for it? How is like? There's a lot of questions that suddenly become, unless like this is just a representation of the force or entity, whether it be supernatural, science fiction, cosmic, whatever. What if this room of them watching this footage is just a visual metaphor and representation for the being observing what's happening on Earth or whatever? Also possible. Feels a little bit less likely, but it's like, it was definitely this was a whale thing to throw in at the end of the episode. That's 5 seconds of the camera pulling back and showing, that moment where it transitioned so that it was clearly coming off of like a CRT TV screen, like, was a set up and take notice kind of moment. It was quite invigorating, and I appreciate it. And if they can do that a few more times, I will be delighted with the show. Absolutely delighted. They also mention all the compasses are acting haywire, given where they are next to the Prometheus. Is that to do with the area that they're in, or is it to do with just the Prometheus itself? Given that they're now moving and dragging the Prometheus with them at the end of the episode, and I suspect that they're still going to have weird things happening, it's probably the Prometheus itself. But it's interesting. It's exciting to find out more of this, because it definitely feels like there's a whole other layer been added to it by the end of this. One that was certainly hinted at in the opening of the first episode, but now with this idea of being observed, it definitely feels that we're veering towards some kind of experiment. The purpose of the experiment remains to be seen. Is it a good purpose? Is it a bad purpose? I don't know. But maybe, like, they're like, her dad is trying to find the person who can solve it because they need this person to solve it to save the world, or so. I don't know. Or is the dad evil and he's wanting someone to solve it so that he can open the box and the Cenobites can come and give him the pleasures that he's only dreamed of? I don't know. A lot of questions, but we can't discount many things right now. I will say that much. So yeah, there you go. I don't know what to add. My brain's melting trying to like piece this together and think about it. But final 5 seconds though was fantastic. Cannot fault it. The episode was good before that. There was a lot of good character beats and kind of the realization that there, all these connections, and that some people clearly didn't know each other before but they've forgotten, which is fun from like the idea of the true love kind of like coming through even without the memories. Kind of sweet if that's the way it's going to go with some of these connections. The other thing that I'd mention actually is that you can tell this is from the makers of Dark, because it ended with the montage showing all the characters at the end. That was something that almost every episode of Dark had, and I will be giggling a little bit when it does it on this show going forward, because I noticed it this time and now I'm always going to notice it. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's my thoughts on episode 2 of 1899. Where's the TV cameras, guys? Where's the TV cameras? So thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Please obviously give your thoughts on this episode in the comments. You can support all the content and keep it all coming by hitting the super thanks button, or go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us over there on a monthly basis. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?